He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Give us a backstory to this executive order signed by the president. We understand that you've been at this for a while. Is it the same story since about 10 years ago?
Thank you so much, Chamberlain, and my friend. Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to be here to share my thoughts on this very important discussion. Let me also start by thanking Mr. President, because this is the best Salah gift he could have given to Nigerians. And I thank him for his courage, because like you rightly noted, this is an issue that has been boggling the minds of Nigerians for quite some time. And by way of background, if you remember, during the third alteration, the National Assembly made provision for financial autonomy, both for the federal legislature, the state legislature, and that of the federal judiciary and the state judiciary. Unfortunately, the state legislature, when they were to confirm or affirm that provision, inadvertently approved that of the federal legislature and that of the judiciary and voted against their own autonomy. But fortunately, in 2011, during the 8th Assembly, the National Assembly took that up once again, and at the end of the day, the president did not assent to that alteration. But the 8th Assembly at the end of the day took that up, and fortunately for Nigerians, that alteration sailed through after a series of consultations. But like the two gentlemen mentioned, the president assented to that amendment, specifically to Section 121(3) of the 1999 Constitution, in specifically May 23rd, 2018. And between that and now, the state governments were expected, the governors were expected to implement that provision, but unfortunately, due to one reason or the other, they've not been able to do that. But let me also say that a lot of consultations has been going on between the Conference of Speakers and the state governors. I'm aware that sometime last year, a joint technical committee was set up between the governors and the State House of Assembly to agree on the implementation modalities, but not much progress was made in that regard. I'm also aware that critical stakeholders, including the Friends of Democracy and all other well-meaning Nigerians, have been engaging at different levels, and an SOS was sent to Mr. President because, according to Section 5 of the 1999 Constitution, like rightly pointed, Section 1B grants the President the power and the responsibility to maintain the observance of the 1999 Constitution. So if a constitutional provision has been made, every stakeholder in the country, including governors, have a responsibility to comply. And once there is non-compliance, Mr. President has a responsibility to enforce that. So the executive order number 10 that was signed by Mr. President simply is not granting autonomy, because the Constitution has already granted autonomy, but it's only providing an implementation framework for state governors and other stakeholders to comply with that provision. And I know
just one moment, just one moment, Mr. Mutu. You said that to a large extent, this conversation has been going on for a while, and it'll be nice to understand what are what's the undertone, why the delay, well, you also mentioned something the other time, that the state assemblies themselves were not very open to agreeing to their own autonomy. From your findings, if any, what did you discover was the reason for that position that they took at the time?
Two issues. One was that most of them didn't even understand the implications of that provision or that amendment. They were a lot of them were not informed, and there was limited consultation between the National Assembly and the State Assembly on the essence or the rationale behind that amendment. So there was limited consultation. So when the amendment got to the State Assemblies, most of them didn't really understand. The second part of it was that the president also, due to their overbearing, the state governors, due to their overbearing influence on the State House of Assembly, impressed upon them, in fact, I want to say hoodwinked them from agreeing to that alteration. The same situation happened during the last alteration. It took a lot of persuasion, it took a lot of consultation, it took a lot of discussion for this State House of Assembly to understand what it meant, and maybe at the end of the day, they all agreed to that alteration. But you must also remember, for any amendment to scale through, you require at least 24 State House of Assembly endorsing that alteration. In the last exercise, they were about 1, they got about 23. They were short by 1, but this time around, they overwhelmingly voted in favor of that alteration. So the other issue, yes.
Okay, just a moment.
The other issue was, okay.
If you can hear me, I just need to get some clarity. Yes, this looks like autonomy, but then on the other hand, some people will say this is just a way of removing state executives as middlemen, in quotes, such that the power is now mainly at the center. So don't you think, while this is given some form of autonomy to the state's judiciary and legislature, is also given more power to the federal structure?
I don't think that is correct. What the president has simply done is that there should be all institutions of governance, all arms of government should be equal, as envisaged by the framers of the 1999 Constitution. We practice a presidential system of government where we have 3 arms, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. And based on the principle of separation of powers, these 3 arms of government must be able to check and balance each other, providing oversight over each other. But as we have today, we have a very, very powerful executive arm and very weak judicial and legislative arm, thereby defeating the whole essence of separation of powers. So what the current amendment has simply done is to say that these 3 arms of government, because funding is critical to the survival of any institution, is only saying that these 3 arms of government should have direct access to funding at the federal and at the state level. At the federal level, the National Assembly and the federal judiciary is already enjoying this financial. And that is why you can see some level of checks and balances at the federal level. The National Assembly can stand up today and challenge the executive on points of law and governance. But at the state level, like has been pointed out earlier, both the judiciary, the state judiciary, and the state legislature go to the executive cap in hand. And you can see speakers going to the state governors, waiting in the waiting room for up to 9 hours with files, seeking for resources. So it has nothing to do with the balance of power between the federal and the state level. Rather, it's more of an horizontal balancing. So in this case, the
just add to this, while you also, in conclusion of your comments, add to this, stretch it for us. Now, when this is operationalized, what do we expect to see?
Okay. What you will see is that you will see a very, very vibrant legislature at the state level. You will also see an independent legislature that is able to provide oversight over the executive arm, is also able to ask the hard questions of the generation and the utilization of public funds, is also able to check the excesses of the executive. In some way, the judiciary, high court judges will be able to dispense justice without fear or favor. Because most of the cases at the state high courts are borders on, right? But implementation of state policies, which the executive.
You know, but the thing about this is this. Much as that's the way it's supposed to play out, how are they going to do that if the state executive or the governor is the one that appended the signature for the judge to be appointed?
Okay, I think let's separate the issues. There are different layers, and you can't resolve all the issues one day. I agree that is a big challenge, but maybe what we should do is to take one at a time. Appointment of judges is one issue. Independence, because it's also one of the critical determinants of the level of independence of appointment, is one critical issue. But what we have done so far, based on the amendment that is on the table, is that of providing administrative and financial independence across the tiers of government. Maybe when this is done, another level of advocacy could be around the electoral process, how members of the legislature are elected, what is the recruitment process, what is the influence the governors have over them. Same way we'll be looking at the issue of the independence of the judiciary when governors are the ones that append The same thing at the federal level also. It's a separate issue of advocacy or reform that we can be taking for. But at the moment, what is on the table is how can we ensure that the legislature and the judiciary have access to fund without depending on the mood of the governor. If the governor is happy today, he releases, and if he's not happy today, he does not. That is an aberration. And what the president has simply done, and remember, the executive order is not at this moment saying expressly that money should be deducted at source. It only says in the event that any state government governor refused to comply with the provisions of the Constitution, it's giving power to the Accountant General, depending on the order issued by the Attorney General, for those funds provided in the budget of each state to be deducted at source on a pro rata basis. So give an example. If the budget of the legislature and the state level is 1 billion per annum, or 1.2 billion as the case may be per annum, if you prorate to over 12 months, it comes to 100 million per month. What is saying that the governor or the accountant general of each state, once money comes into there, is supposed to transfer that 100 million to the account of the state assembly and the heads of the courts of the judiciary, the respective courts, for them to utilize and use for the purpose of their function.
But the thing about
today, once the budget is passed, the governors now act as accountants or the treasurers, and the legislature and the judiciary go cap in hand every day to ask for the release of those funds.
The thing about that, briefly, is the fact that the funds are not usually available all the time. So, I mean, this can be quite tricky if the judiciary says, well, we need to get our 1 billion. We don't really care if there is money available or not. That's quite tricky. But on a final note, it will seem as though, the governors are the ones taking the fall in this whole conversation. And it begs the question, I think everybody would agree that there is a need for that independence. So why does it seem as though state executives are holding on to this? Because the truth is this, they can still find other ways to frustrate the judiciary if they really want to. So why do you think state executives seem to be holding on to this?
I want to believe that why they've not been able to implement this, and let me also say that it's not all the states. Out of the 36 states, 6 of them, about 5 of them have started implementing this. Delta is one of those states. Kwara is another state. Jigawa is one. I'm also aware that Bayelsa State has started implementation of this, and Ebonyi states have started implementation. It's a consultation that has been ongoing. And when in our conversation with some of the governors, they were also saying that how is the implementation going to be done? There was confusion, just like you said. When there is no sufficient fund, and the other arms of government insist on getting their full money, what do we do in that circumstance? So what I would be proposing is that, and in our conversation, speakers on the House of Assembly also agree, that once there is a revenue shortfall, based on the tripartite consultation between the 3 arms of government, an agreement will be reached on a monthly basis. What is the level of shortfall? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? And that 20% will be cut across board. But it's not for just the governor sitting down to determine suo motu what to give to each arm of government based on his own desire. It should be based on the product of a man. Nobody is saying that the monies must be given 100% to the legislature or to the judiciary once there is a shortfall.
All right, then, Mr. John Mutu, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there.